you're starting to improvise, one of the intimidating things about the whole idea is that you've got all this blank space to fill up. And so the question is, what do you play? How much of it do you play? Where do you play it? All this kind of thing. So in this lesson, I just want to show you a really simple 3-step process for letting the tune itself show you what to play when you improvise. And the 3 steps are just, first, looking at the phrasing of the melody itself, and then second, looking at what the rhythms of those phrases are. And then finally, the 3rd step is to play new licks using those rhythms and those phrases, but to replace the notes of the melody with notes that you've chosen from the blues scale. I'm going to do this in the key of E, playing the traditional 8-bar blues, treble in mind. So the first thing is just to look at the melody. So here's what the tune sounds like if you play it in the key of E. So there are really just 3 phrases in this whole 8-bar tune. Here's the first one. You can almost hear that as 2 little phrases, like a little call and response between the longer first phrase and the little answer to it. But when you put them together, you get this one phrase. And then there's a little bit of space. And if you're trying to figure out, like, how do I figure out what the phrases of the song are, just look for the space, look for the gaps, and whatever happens, on either side of that gap, that's a phrase. So then there's a little breathing room, and then we have the next phrase. And again, that comes to a rest, and you've got some breathing room. So here's the second phrase. And then finally, those 2 things, they make up a kind of call and response on their own, right? Answered by. And then that takes up the first 4 bars of the tune. And then the second 4 bars are basically a longer answer to all of that. And then you've got 2 whole bars at the end, where you usually hear some kind of turnaround. So that's it. There's just 3 phrases to play through one chorus of this 8-bar blues. So now we can look at the rhythm of those phrases and also at the same time where those phrases land or how they resolve, what note they actually land on. So this first phrase, if we thought of it in terms of the timing, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Right? So it starts before the first bar, comes in on beat 1, and then this answer lands at the beginning of bar 2. And it lands on this F sharp note. This is the 5th of the B7 chord. So we've got a sort of bright but bluesy lick that takes us to the 5 chord. So this opening phrase is really taking us from 1 to 5. And that's important. Licks take you somewhere. They start in one place and they land or resolve in another place. And that's something that we can keep in mind when we go to come up with our own licks. The next phrase also starts sort of in the middle of a bar, in the middle of the second bar, or towards the end of the second bar. So here's the beginning of the 3rd bar, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So it takes the whole bar of E lands on, literally on the note A and on the chord A. So here we have a phrase that starts on 1, because we're back to the E in bar 3. And this one is taking us from 1 over to 4. So for the first line, we have a lick that starts on 1 and takes us to the 5. Then we have a lick that takes us from 1 to 4. And then this lick, we're on the 1 chord, passing through the 5 chord, and taking us back to 1. So that's a little more complicated. It's really 2 smaller phrases. So I'm going from 1 to 5, and then back to 1. So 3 licks, and the first one takes us from 1 to 5, the next one takes us from 1 to 4, and the last one takes us 1, 5, 1. So now we've looked at the phrasing of the tune, and we've looked at the rhythms of those phrases and how they resolve. So now we can take the blues scale and we can create some new licks using the rhythms or the phrasing and the resolution or the landing points of that phrasing as a template for what we're going to do. And if we played just the E blues scale for the whole 8 bars, we have the notes in that scale to land on notes from the 5. Right, we've got a big fat B here, which is the root of the B7 chord. We've got this F sharp on top. That's not really in the scale, but it's in the B7 chord. So like the melody, we can borrow that if we want to. Well, it's kind of cheating. And then we've got this note. This is the flat 7 of B7. So that's kind of fair game. So those are some good landing spots. And then on the A chord, you know, we've got an A sitting right here, and we've got this flat 7 of the A chord here on top. And if we want to cheat again, we can land on C sharp, which is not in the E blues scale, but it's part of the A chord, so people borrow it all the time. Usually give it back. And so we've got our licks that are going to land. So our first lick. Right, there's a blues lick that starts on the 1. So again, the same rhythm as the melody. And this phrase is going to get answered by these 2 notes, which take us to the 5 and the root of the B7 chord, still using a blues scale note. Now we're going to have a longer phrase. So again, blues licks. Landing on the root of the 4 chord, because this is a lick that's supposed to go, like the melody, from 1 to 4. So there's our first 4 bars. We've got new blues licks that are just using the melody as a rhythmic template. And then we're going to have a longer phrase that's going to go from 1 down to 5 and keep going with blues licks until it gets back to 1. So we put all that together and we get this. And if it sounds familiar, it's because it's got the same basic rhythmic outline as the melody, but it's blues licks instead. So it doesn't sound like you're just repeating the melody, even though it's kind of conveying a similar feeling, which is kind of what you want, to take a solo that's got some kind of connection to the original tune, but that gives you the latitude to go off and do some things of your own. So that's the idea. So the 3 steps again, you're going to start by looking at what the phrasing of the original melody is. Next, you're going to look at what the rhythms of those phrases are and what notes they land on or resolve to. And then finally, you're going to create new blues licks out of the E blues scale, in this case, using the rhythms of the original phrases of the melody to come up with your own ideas. So that's the idea. Have fun working on that. If you've got any questions or comments about this lesson, please leave them down below. I would love to hear from you. In a few weeks, I'll be doing an online workshop going into some of these improvisation ideas in more detail, and I'll post more information about that here soon. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.